Hello, everyone. Welcome to our fourth meeting. Fourth meeting of the quarter. We're going to be going over stretchy rigs today, the various setups you can do with that. I believe Dara will be taking it starting out today.
Yep. Hello. So yeah, we'll be talking about stretchy rigs. So what they allow you to extend your mesh beyond its normal limits when it's in IK mode, so you can like stretch beyond that limit. So I find that they're very useful for smear frames or just posing that doesn't go off model. And then they're also very handy for small tweaks to poses, just like a little push that doesn't go off model. So how they applied, where they used. Um, they're mostly in like IK setups because at least with FK setups, those can be like naturally translated and stretched. Where IK, if you just did like a very very basic like IK setup, they have a limit to it. So that's where you kind of apply this setup where the IK can go past its limit. And there's kind of a few ways to do this, do stretchy setups. So there can be like translated scale, volume control, limb or bending, and pinning limb stretches. And some common controls for these rigs. So stretchy, it's a float attribute that's typically found on like a settings control or a limb control to enable stretchy going from 0 to 1. And then volume is also a float attribute that can be found commonly also on your settings control of a rig, and that enables you or disables the invasion of volume when you stretch a limb. Um, so whenever you stretch, that kind of controls like how much volume you're getting in that area. And then pinning, a float attribute that allows you to pin the elbow or knees to your whole vector control, giving you more control of your limb. So I'm just going to give like a quick rundown of the stretchy limb rig through joint scaling, and then of course we can demo this if requested. So essentially, to start off, you want to create like a distance dimension node by using the distance tool, which you'll get under the create menu, measure tools, distance tools. And with that, you want to get the entire distance of your limb. So for example, if you have an arm, you want to get it from your shoulder joint to your wrist or hand joint. Um, your distance tool will give you two locators for measurement. So you would point constrain those locators to um, the joints of where you want to find the distance. So the main thing is the whole distance of like the limb. You'll definitely be using that in your calculations. So you will probably point constraint, like for example in an arm, the locators to the shoulder joint and the wrist joint. Um, and then afterwards, I like to work in the node editor. So from there, you would um, use a lot of multiply divide nodes, and like you want to be keeping track of your math and numbers, because when you're troubleshooting like stretchy, you'll probably either be troubleshooting your connections or your math. Um, so starting off, like you can do so multiply divide node for global scale. Um, that would have the inputs of your distance of the ohm and the scale y of the root, and then you would have that operation of the multiply divide node set to divide. Um, this factors in your kind of your global scale for the setup. So if you don't have global scale kind of put into your stretchy setup, whenever you scale the rig, your stretchy limbs are going to go crazy when you scale because it pretty much ignores scaling. So this is kind of the part where you factor in scale from the root, and that feeds into the stretchy setup. Then next you would have another multiply divide node where you input the distance with the global scale included, and then these values come into this multiply divide node that will process and be normalized to a value that you can use to scale the character. And then next you would also create a blend colors to, wait, go back
Sorry,
one.
I accidentally hit the scroll wheel on my mouse.
You're good. And then next you would create a blend color so that the animator has the choice to turn on and off the stretchy limbs, and that would be found in your settings control. And then from there you want to feed like this number from the multiply divide, from the blend colors into a condition node. And a condition node basically takes like a mathematical comparison, and it will compare your first value to a second value. So like in a stretchy setup, it determines whether or not like the distance of the limb is greater than the original distance, which then like allows it to stretch. So you feed these numbers into the first and the second term of the condition node. And thus, if the first term is greater than the second value, it will be the value that it's going to be stretched to. And then if it's false, it's going to be at its default 1. So essentially, yes, the condition node will allow your rig to stretch if it's being stretched beyond the distance of the original limb. And then through all of that, you would connect this to the major axis of your limbs scale. So you would connect that condition node to like probably your IK joints of like the shoulder, elbow, and wrist. And that's how you would stretch your arm through joint scaling.
Roman, if you'd like to take it away for this slide. Roman?
Yeah, there we
There you
go.
go.
I had myself on mute.
Okay, there you
go. But yeah, and so there's also another way to make things stretch, which is through the translate values of the joints and for the Yaki handle. And so the way that I do this is it's kind of similar to not really Dara's version of the scale, but also like it's just also really similar to another scale version that you can do. But basically, somewhat similar. So you'll take your measure tool, you kind of go from the top to the bottom joint, and you'll point constrain the end locator to the control, and point constrain the top locator to the top joint. So then they're kind of, the measurements will always be there. And so once you have that, you're going to start making some multiply divide nodes. So you're going to want to put the output distance shape into multiply divide 1, which is the first one you'll make, set that to divide, and have that go into input 1x. And then you're going to make another multiply divide node, output x of multiply divide 2, and you're going to want to take the multiply y and then put it into multiply divide input 2x. And then you're going to want to take, for your scale compensate, take the output x of the root control and to put that into the second multiply divide node that you created, into multiply divide 2, and put it into 2x. And so then input 1 of multiply divide 2 is the total distance of the measure. This is the scale compensate. So then after that, put output x of multiply divide 1 into a new condition node, which is going to be set to greater than or equal, second term equals 1, and put the output x of multiply divide into color of true R and first term. And so once you have that, you're going to want to make 2 multiply divide nodes for the 2 joints that you have and set them to multiply, and have out color R feeds into the 2x of these different nodes. And so then for the 1x value is the current joint translate. So you're going to have to click the joint and find out what's the current translate x of it, and that's where you're going to put in into 1x. And so keep that on multiply. Then you're going to want to do the output x of the 2 multiply divide nodes into the translate of each joint. So in the little screenshot, you can see I have one of them selected. It's going into that's my second joint. Or actually, wait, no, that's my third joint because I do it from the elbow to the wrist kind of. And due to the scale not being due to the scale not being used to stretch, don't forget to add blend colors to the scale so it can be switched properly from IK to FK mode.
Okie dokie. And this kind of takes us into how to pin your knees or your elbows so you can kind of lock down that middle point of your IK arm so you can have more control of your elbow. The only problem that will come about with this is that your elbow will be stretching pretty often, so it's kind of only if you want to maintain a more reserved pose for the character. But taking what we've used for either if you're using a joint scaling or a joint translate method, this should work pretty well. Anyway, because we're now more into an IK specific setup for we're now in more of the joint scaling setups, which will require a condition node, and will require the limb to bend and such. Whereas the joint translate is more for when you need to stretch a curve info node, for example, or an IK spline handle, for example. With that said, we will need to create more distance nodes. I'm more or less using an example from an arm, so I'll just be referring to the arm from now on. So you'll have your shoulder, elbow, and wrist joint. You'll want to make a distance node, so you'll put a locator at the shoulder and the elbow, and then one at the elbow and the hand. So you have 2 distances going to going from your shoulder IK to your elbow pole vector control, or wherever that locator or control is in space, and then from that PV control to your hand. After you create those 2 locators, you'll want to point constrain them to their respective nodes. So you should be able to, you can just point constraint your distance node at your hand to your hand control or whatever group you're using to put that in, and your PV control to your elbow locators. And you could leave the shoulder point constrained or just leave it in space, since it's not necessarily the most valuable part of this. So once you get that, you'll want to go back into the node editor, and you'll now have 2 distance nodes to deal with. So basically, it'll be mirrored for each half of the limb. Global scale will allow you to avoid double transforms, where if you scale it up, your elbow and your upper arm and forearm will essentially just scale outward and continue to increase in size on a double scale. So you'll want to have your operation set to divide for this one, and you'll want the scale Y of your root control, or if you have 2 controls, both your root and your move control, to be in there, and have the scale Y be your input 2x, as you'll have an X, Y, and a Z, so you'll just want to use just the input 2x here. And then you'll set your distance value, or your distance attribute that comes from your distance node. You should be able to just click on the green dot and access it, and put that into your input 1x for your global scale. Afterwards, this is kind of where it becomes a little bit more different for normalizing. You'll do a similar setup where you'll have your output x of your global scale go into your input 1x here, and your operation will also be divide. However, you will not use the default distance of this, because the default distance that we're using for this is from this point is to a different point in space than its actual default. So what you actually want to do is click on, you could make another distance node and grab and pin it to your shoulder, and then pin it to your default elbow, or your default elbow and your default wrist, and then you can use the distance you get from that. Or you can just click on your elbow and wrist joint to get for your translate X, or whatever major axis goes down the length of the joint. Typically it's X from what I've used. And then you'll put that in your input 2x. After you do that, you'll want to create a blend colors node that will intercept your condition out color R value. So you'll be disabling the connection that you have to your upper arm and your forearm joint, for example, for this case, and putting that out color R into the input to into the input sorry into the input 1 input 2R. I keep mixing up the colors between blend colors nodes, but you'll put that into your input 2R, and when you do that, it will be the secondary value that will be your default value by nature, and you'll put your normalize into your input 1R. So when the blender is set to 1, it will extend to this and pin to that location and that distance and that size. Whereas if it is just in a if it's just in the input 2R, it'll be set to your default location. With that done, we've now converted this into a 0 to 1 factor with a normalized div, so we can put this into the scale X attribute of your joints, of your upper arm and your forearm joints. But that depends on the scale axis that's pointing down the length of the joint, as before. And with that said, we kind of go into creating stretchy IK spine curve, a stretchy rig with an IK spine curve. So we talked I believe last quarter we did talk about the IK spline handle and how it creates a curve node for you. This will be kind of our starting point. We'll want to grab that curve and go into our node editor. And we'll create a curve info node. When you do that, you'll want to plug your world space attribute from this curve shape node into the input curve attribute. You will need to go to other and then click on it in the I believe it in one of those in one of the channel boxes that'll provide you. Afterwards, you'll get the arc length and the default length of this curve right here. And we'll basically go through a similar method of putting it into a global scale node where we'll put it into the input 1x and the scale of your root control or move control into this input 2x, repeat for however many controls you have, and put it into a normalized node. Afterward, but the case where it differs from the pinning is that you'll just grab the default arc length. You can literally just Control-C, Control-V it into the input 2x here and set the operation to divide. Then we'll use our blend colors nodes to enable and disable the stretchy. Set the input 2R to a value of 1 and the input 1R to the output X value of the normalized div. And for this case, I used multiply double linear nodes. You could also just probably use multiply divide nodes. But you'll have a input 1 and an input 2. So what you want to do is set the out color R to the value of input 2, and you'll set so now you'll have a 0 to 1 value that's kind of a percentage for this case, and the input 1 will be the X translate, or whatever dominant axis that goes down the length of your joint is. You'll put that value in the input 1, so we'll be turning this into multiplying the translate X of like the left shin joint, and on a case-by-case basis, and it will just multiply that as you stretch it. This will require the creation of 5 nodes. So yeah, if you learn how to script this, then it'll be definitely a bit more manageable. But lastly, before Roman takes away with the awesome spine, this will be just a bit of a subsidiary to the IK spine or whatever IK spline handle you have for controlling the volume of a rig. This will require the use of scales for this setup. You'll have a blend colors node that will allow you to immediately take your normalized div and plug it into the input 1R and set the input color 2R to 1, and it'll allow you to enable or disable whatever you do in this case. Then we'll need 2 multiply divide nodes before plugging them into our scale inputs. We'll need a power of the calculation, so we'll need to input this out color R into the input 1x and set the operation to power. We'll want to take the power of this calculation right here by setting our input 2x to 0.5, and then we need to invert that power calculation by setting our output x of this power node to the input 2x here, and then set the value of input 1x to 1 and use the divide operation. If you were using scales, you would and your dominant axis was the x-axis. You just output this invert div node to the unfilled axes that you have. But if you're using translate, you just set it to the unfilled axes that you haven't used scales for, haven't used an axis for. So if you use translate x, you'd use scale y and z to kind of invert it and squish it inward on itself as you stretch it out to maintain the proper volume. But with that said, Roman, would you like to take it away with the awesome spine?
Yeah, sure. And I got myself unmuted this time. All right, and so the awesome spine, which is appropriately named, is a spine setup that allows for the spine to stretch and twist in a 360 plus degree range of motion, pretty much infinite actually, to wherever you need, with individual controls of the spine joints as well. So it uses a combination of IK spline for the base curve with individual IK handles for each joint, and to get the curve, it mainly uses plus minus average nodes. And for some of the stretch, you can apply your usual multiply divide methods, because those are, this is kind of like however you would do it. And it's a bit too much to explain on the on just like one slide. So if you want to have a full in-depth guide on creating the awesome spine, you can follow the link that we have here. I also threw it in the meeting topics channel in a club activity. But yeah, you can see down here how there's the plus minus average nodes that go into each other, but then also in the image, it allows for you can like bend the chest and the hip controls to wherever you want, but then you can also just add a crazy amount of twist to them, and there's no weird like compression or deformation, or it's not going to like reverse flip on itself or anything like that. It's pretty easy to use. And also the Professor Ahmed El Matwari at the Savannah campus, he will teach you the awesome spine rig for his rigging classes.
Yeah. With that said, does anybody have any questions or any demos they would like to have gone over, just to kind of help out with that?
I have a cool node that I found a while ago that I thought was worth sharing.
Tell about.
It's called the distance between node, and it does the same thing as like a distance dimension, but you don't have to have extra like DAG objects in your scene. So you can just take your joint and plug it into the distance between, take your other joint, plug it into the distance between, so you don't need like extra locators as buffers.
That's right. I think you should.
Which is pretty handy.
And you call it a distance between node?
Yeah, let me check and make sure it's called distance between. Yeah, distance between. And it takes, I think, world space matrices as inputs. Yeah. It is pretty handy.
Yeah, I think that
especially for stretchy setups.
Yeah, that kind of just basically like you just don't need to have like an entire group dedicated to all your distance between nodes and locators in your rig. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got it. That's cool.
Are there any topics you want to see demoed, possibly?
I have a question about our gig going on for later.
Oh wait, what?
I have a question about a rig like I tried to do, but for later after this topic.
Okie dokie.
We just see a demo of the spine.
Oh, the awesome spine.
The spine squash and stretch. No, not the awesome spine. The just regular squash and stretch with volume.
Okie dokie. That should be. Yeah, I could do that. I'll just turn my mouse on and switch screens to Maya then. Okay, you guys can see Maya?
Yep.
Yep.
All right, cool. Okay, for this, I'm just going to create the spine when it catches up. Okay. So just going to create a joint chain, and I'll just rename these just so that makes it less complicated down the line. Okay, I'm going to see if there is, that doesn't appear to be. So the first thing that we'll do when we want to create a spine handle is there's the skeleton menu, and it's the second list in the IK menu. It's just under create IK handle. Let's create IK spine handle. I'm going to try and dock this tool settings to the side. Okay, reset it. We'll just go default settings, and we'll make a IK handle here, spine handle, spine EFF, spine curve. For the cases of global scaling, we'll want to turn off inherits transform here, so that'll get rid of a fair amount of our double transforms here. But we'll just go straight into the stretchy. Let's see. Display local rotation axes. Okay, so X's are pretty dominant view here. Except for this one, I'm going to get rid of that. And we should. Okay, perfect. And once we do that, I'm going to turn this off and go into the node editor. Where is it? There it is. So once we do that, we'll have our spine curve shape. We'll move it over here a little bit, and we will create a, we'll type in curve info. I don't think you guys can see the option, but yeah, basically just type in curve info with the tab key, and you should be able to get it up. I don't know if my screen was showing it because I have to be stuck on Maya. But click on this box right here, and you'll immediately have the world space option, and we'll grab world space bracket 0, grab it, put it in here, and click on the other box that pops up and switch it to input curve. I'm just going to name this spine info for now. And once we do that, we'll want to create a global scale node. So we'll type tab and type in multiply divide. It'll be the first at the top, and global scale spine normalized div. Come over here, change the operation to divide, should be the third in the option list. And once we do that, we can click on this box, and the first one in your list will be arc length. We'll click on that and put it into, drag it over here, click it, and you'll have input 1, input 2. Go to input 1 and then put it in input 1x. So you can see that our default arc length is 3. We'll keep that in mind for later. And I'm going to also create just a circle in here to make that the root control. We'll grab the scale y and put it into the input 2x here. And we got that set up. I'm just going to duplicate this just for ease, and just get rid of global scale and then type in spine normalized div. Change this to a value of 3.000, so we set that down. And we'll send the output x of this value, so we'll click on it, and the third option on the list is output. Then we'll go to output x, drag that in, and put it into the input 1x. So when we click that, we have our value of 3, and we'll have our default value of 3 here. afterwards, we will create our blend colors node, and that'll be right here. We'll just call it spine stretch choice, and grab the output X of this value and put it into our color 1R, right here. And if I go to the channel box, you can see that that's highlighted. We'll change color 2R to 1. And for the hell of it, I'm just gonna quickly add an attribute here to enable Stretchy. So that kind of just goes in line where I'll just create that really quickly. But so now we have an attribute right here. We will grab it by clicking on here and go into the Stretchy attribute. It should be near the middle of the list since it goes in alphabetical order in this list. So click on it and drag it over here into the Blender attribute. And now that we got that, we're going to create our stretch value nodes. So we'll create multiply double linear, or type in mult, and it should be at the top of the list by that point. So I'm going to just name these spine1 stretch val for our stretch value. And we have our 2 inputs here. We're going to change click on this white circle here, go to output R, and drag it into this to put it into, click on other, and we'll click input 2. After we do that, we will click on the spine 1, and we can see that the value is currently 0. So I guess we'll just put this leave this as 0. Then we will duplicate it a couple times and just rename them real quick. And we'll just grab them and put them all in the input 2 value here. Then we'll just go down through the list here. So we have spine 2 has a value of 1, spine 3 has a value of 1, spine 4 has a value of 1, and spine 5 has a value of 1. So all of these, all the input 1s here can just be equal to 1. And we will grab all of these and just bring them in here. Forgot to mention that we could literally just get rid of spine 5 because that's not going to be getting any transforms. That's actually just more of an orient joint, so that was my bad. But after we do that, we can we can click on this, and it'll just default to giving you the output. We'll click on it, click on here, and you'll have your rotate, scale, and then your translate. We'll put this in the translate X. So we'll just put all of these outputs into the translate X. And for now, I'm going to go back into the viewport so that I can duplicate this and set up a proper set of controls for this rig at the moment. And I'll just call this hip, bind, shoulder, bind. Let's see, hip, bind, and shoulder, bind. Then we'll select these 2 and bind them to our curve. So okay. And we'll go over here and enable Stretchy. And you can see that it's stretching now. So now we got our spine Stretchy, we'll want to properly enable the volume on this. So we'll go back to the node editor. And I'll grab, I don't want to save this file. So spine normalize div here, and we displayed our connections. Right here, what we want to do is grab our output X and create another blend colors node. So we'll call this spine volume choice. Put this into the color 1R and set the color 2R to a value of 1. I'm just going to also go back to the root control and create another float value for volume. 0, 1, and once we do that, we'll have the volume control. I'll turn it to 1 for now. And let's see, let's grab this and click on the dot right here. Volume should be near the bottom, just above world inverse matrix at this current moment. We'll put that into the blender, and that should be it for that. After we do that, we're going to create a multiply divide node, and we'll call this spine stretch pow. So once we do that, we'll set the input 2x right here from the channel box to 0.5, and the out color R, or the output R, of the volume choice node into the input 1x. Afterwards, we'll go to the attribute editor, set the operation to power, should be the bottom one. Then we will, I'm just going to grab like another divide node right here and just duplicate it. Spine, invert, div, and it's we'll set the input 1x to 1 from here. The operation's already set to divide, and we'll set the output x of this node right here to the input 2x right here. This will therefore give us the proper inversion of these calculations, and all we need to do is, because our dominant axis here is the translate x, we'll apply them to the scale y and scale z. So I'm just going to go and try and quickly do that. I'll just try and quickly do that. We now have our inversion done. We'll grab our hip bind joint and we'll just drag it around, and we'll check the value here. You can see that as our translate increases, it equally decreases in the scale y and z. And to showcase this, I'm just going to create like a cylinder real quick. And give it a bunch of height. And we'll just quickly bind it to the skin, grabbing our shoulder joint. You can see that as it stretches, it decreases in volume, and it increases in volume as we reach here, but obviously it does hit a little bit of a limit here. But and once we go click on the root control, we can easily just turn off the volume with that float attribute, or we could just disable the stretchy altogether. In order to get this thing ready for, well, actually, let's first set these to 0. Oh, that's right. I believe it was set to 3, if I recall correctly. We'll just group, let's just group everything together. Rig, oh, bad idea. spine joint group, spine AK group, spine con group, geo group, and control group. We will parent these two together, and we will group this all into rig. Then let's go grab this, see what's broken about it. Okay, that's working, and that isn't working because we have to set a scale constraint on the spine joint group. We'll also just set a parent constraint just for safety. But now it is properly working, and it is scalable. And if we go right here, we can grab the hip joint, scale it, move it around, and control the volume with a single float attribute alongside the stretchy in general.